Greetings! This is Angelus de Mortiel with another multiplayer build guide for Dragon Age Inquisition. So let's talk about the Legionnaire. This lovable dwarf is likely one of the first classes you played in multiplayer. Even when you're not playing, he keeps busy in the deep roads holding off Darkspawn for 2 days at a time. He also enjoys long walks on underground cave beaches, candlelit dinners, and polishing his armor. Wait. Sorry, it appears as if he slipped his Orzammar dating profile into this. Yeah, moving on. Now, this build of the Legionnaire will focus on him as a defender. A defender is a class that directs damage away from allies. This has more recently become known as a tank. Now, a defender can function in multiple ways. However, in this case, the build utilizes drawing enemy attention, or aggro, by taunting as a means by which to accomplish this role. This is also known as an aggro-tank. This build actually has 6 usable abilities as a side effect of building the skill tree for maximal effect. This also allows you to tailor this build a bit from one match to the next, and also has a viable options in the process of leveling. Because there is a lot here, I will be abbreviating a lot of the information to get through it a bit faster. Firstly, let me mention Shield Wall. Shield Wall is a starting defensive skill for the Legionnaire that blocks all incoming damage originating from the front of the Legionnaire at the cost of stamina while generating guard. While Shield Wall is an excellent blocking ability, I typically drop it once I have other skills since the stamina cost for it is just too high. Now, moving on to Warcry. Warcry taunts all enemies within about a 6 to 10 meter area of effect and generates guard for each enemy taunted in this manner. As it sounds, this skill is best used when surrounded by a horde. I do not get the upgrade at this time as it does not appear to be functioning properly. Those watching this beyond version 1.04 may still want to consider it, however. After that, we have Walking Fortress. Walking Fortress makes you invulnerable for 8 seconds, pure and simple. But with its upgrade, Siegebreaker, any enemy that hits you generates guard and lowers your cooldowns of other skills. This is the bread and butter skill of the Legionnaire in this build, as it is the most important part of drawing enemy attention is staying alive. Dead men draw no aggro. Then we have Payback Strike. This is a moderate damage attack, but it most shines with its utility. Not only will Payback Strike do a lot more damage if you use it within 5 seconds or so of the Legionnaire taking damage, it also knocks down or staggers enemies and can stun taunted enemies with the upgrade Sweet Revenge. Most importantly, Payback Strike can be used to recover from disabling effects like being staggered, stunned, or panicked. Next, To the Death is a single target taunt that is useful if you need to draw the attention of a single tougher enemy, like enemy tanks or commanders. This taunt will stay active as long as you stay within 15 meters of that enemy, and every second it's active, that enemy does 5% more damage and takes 5% more damage. Leave it active long enough and any enemy will die with a single hit. But be careful, so will you. Finally, we have Counter-Strike. Counter-Strike is a long-range area of effect taunt that immediately fills your guard, taunts any enemy with a line of sight on you, no matter how far away they are, and gives you 6 seconds of insta-counter to any physical attacks. The description says melee attacks, but I've seen some odd occasions of physical ranged attacks also being countered. Passives of note include Turn the Bolt, which reduces frontal ranged attacks by 50%, Cutting Words, that increases the damage of your team by 20% against enemies that are taunted, and Bulwark that increases your maximum guard by 25%. Optionally, you can take Balanced Combat, which will restore 10 stamina if you hit an enemy within 4 seconds after blocking an attack with Shield Wall, but be aware that you will have to use Shield Wall for this to be of use. Additionally, you can take Bear Mauls the Wolves to reduce stagger from frontal attacks and eliminate bonus damage to your flank. Since this build also uses Flow of Battle, using gear that increases your cunning and critical chance is advised to help reduce the cooldowns of all of your skills. The strategy and theory craft for this build is a bit more in-depth from previous builds. First, we should talk about each of those skills as a whole. You are overall balancing two factors, damage mitigation and taunting. Damage mitigation comes in the form of invulnerability and guard. Warcry, Counterstrike, and To the Death both can taunt and generate guard. Shield Wall and Walking Fortress both grant conditional invulnerability and generate guard as well, with the latter being a bit more efficient. How you mix these together largely depends on your team composition and personal preference. I myself will typically use Payback Strike, Walking Fortress, and Counterstrike, then interchange To the Death and Warcry as needed based upon the ranged versus melee ratio of my team. This, like any tank or defender, relies on you paying attention to enemies. Ideally, your teammates should be focused on ranged damage classes first, such as archers or mages. As such, you will want to leave them to their work. You should look first to enemy tanks, such as brutes or pride demons, then other enemy melee classes. Keep that in mind always. After you know your enemy, next you must know your terrain, lest it also become your enemy. See a nice ambush spot but the enemies are too far away in the distance? Don't hesitate to use Counterstrike to pull or lure your enemies into that ambush. Once the enemy is moving towards you, you and your allies should move into positions just out of the line of sight of enemy archers, forcing them into close quarters with the rest of the group. Once the enemy moves into your kill box, use To the Death on any enemy tanks, initiate Walking Fortress, then move in and start bludgeoning enemies as much as possible. Be mindful to continually evade the enemy tank. If necessary, use Warcry or Counterstrike again to regain enemy attention if lost. Now comes the tricky part, positioning. As the fight joins, you want to keep enemy aggro while carefully moving around to the direction from where the enemy originated. This will mean that all enemies are focused on you and will be turned around, exposing their flank to your damage-dealing teammates. This, above all, is what makes a good aggro tank truly great, and is also the hardest skill to master. Even if your positioning needs a bit of practice, as mine does, do not fret. Even just drawing the enemy attention in front of your teammates is still effective to a degree. You might be asking, how does Payback Strike fit in? Since the Legionnaire is most commonly found in a mosh pit of enemies thirsty for his blood, where being knocked down or stunned is usually a death sentence, Payback Strike is your panic button. If you get knocked down, Payback Strike will cause you to simultaneously recover instantly and knock down all enemies around you, giving you some breathing room. In closing, this build is a real juggernaut. It's for those players that want to be the center of attention and want to laugh at enemies as they try in vain to bring you down. It's really no surprise that he had no problem holding off the Darkspawn in the deep roads for 2 days at a time. Yeah. Again, as I always say, this is not the best build for the Legionnaire. There is no such thing as a best build. Have another way to build the Legionnaire? Let me know in the comments below. As always, If you enjoyed the video or have something to say, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Once again, this is Angelus Demortiel signing off.